Today, I'm going to be talking about verse 40 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. This is the last verse of the 40. So in this verse, Bhagavan, in a sense, summarizes the whole aim of the work. Generally, all Hinduism is not just one religion; it's a family of religions, and in its broadest sense, it includes Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, and so many different philosophies and schools of thought and are there within that very, very broad family. Generally, all of them are agreed that the aim is moksha or mukti. They may call it by different names, but they all have have an idea that the ultimate aim of life is liberation in some form or other. But there are many different, because people are of many different levels of spiritual maturity, they have many different ideas about what liberation actually is. So very broadly speaking, there are three different views about liberation. One is that it's a state in which one retains a form. Another is that it's a formless state. Another is that it's a state in which one can, at will, one can change from form to formless and back and forth. So Bhagavan refers to these three very broad understandings of what the state of liberation is like. What he says in the first sentence is, uru-v-aruvam, uru-v-aruvam, mūṇḍṛā urumu-mutti eṉṇil, uraippaṉ. That means, literally, if it is said that liberation that one will experience is three, form, formless, form, formless, I will say. What he implies by saying that is, if it is said that mukti, that's liberation, that one will experience or that one will attain or that will happen, is of three kinds: with form, without form, or either with form or without form. That is a state in which one can alternate back and forth between being having a form and being formless. I will say, and then he gives his verdict in the next sentence. That's why he ends this sentence saying uraippaṉ, I will say. When Bhagavan made all the 42 verses of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, that's the 40 main verses and the 2 Mangalam verses, into one Kalivemba, by linking all the verses together, he extended this first sentence by adding before it an adverbial clause, manatuku otangu, which means agreeably to the mind, suitably to the mind, or so as to be appropriate to the mind, and which implies in order to be agreeable to each mind, or so as to be suited to the maturity or ripeness of each mind. That is, not everyone will think a formless state is an agreeable state. Many people like to think of liberation as a state in which one retains one's individuality and has some sort of form and is in some way separate from God. There's so many different ideas people have, but it's all according to the maturity of mind. One idea or another about moksha will appeal. So it's according to the purity of it's according to the maturity of the mind, but so many different descriptions of mukti are there. So many different and quite contradictory concepts of mukti are there. So with this Kalivemba extension, this first sentence is manatuku otangu, uru-v-aruvam, uru-v-aruvam, mūṇḍṛā urumu-mutti eṇṉil, uraippaṉ. That means, if it is said so as to be agreeable to the mind, that liberation that one will experience is three: form, formless, form, formless, I will say. And what this implies is, if it is said in order to be agreeable to each mind, or so as to be suited to the maturity or ripeness of each mind. But liberation that one will experience is of three kinds: with form, without form, or either with or without form, I will say. And what he will say is in the next sentence. This Kalivemba link word Bhagavan adds here is very significant, because there are, even within Bhagavan's teachings, there are different levels of explanation Bhagavan has given, and all those different levels of explanation are to suit different levels of maturity. Not everyone is, for example, Bhagavan's main teaching is that this world is just a dream, and that there's only one dreamer, namely ourselves, and that by investigating ourselves, we can wake up from this dream. But this idea does not appeal to everyone. So for people who weren't ready to accept this, Bhagavan sometimes talked as if God created the world. For example, some people seeing the world and seeing all the injustices and all the sufferings in the world, they think something must be done to improve the world. So when people used to talk to Bhagavan about the state of the world and the need to improve the world, Bhagavan used to say, "He who has created this world knows how to take care of it. You can leave it to him." In other words, Bhagavan tried to gently nudge them towards self-surrender. And when he said, "He who has created this world," obviously he's referring to God. So sometimes Bhagavan talked as if the world was created by God, whereas his main teaching is the world is just a dream. It's created by the dreaming mind. So these different levels are there to suit different mentalities, and also in different contexts, different levels of teaching are appropriate. Well, the teachings that are given talking about how we should live our life in this world are obviously of a different level to the teachings that are given about turning solely within. So these are all according to context and according to the needs of the mind at that moment. So these words manatuku or tangu are very significant words here. They apply obviously to this sentence, but they also apply in so many other contexts. So it's very important to understand. And this also explains why in Advaita in general, there are so many different explanations. Like the majority of Advaitins, of people who consider themselves to be Advaitins, are not ready to accept that this world is just a dream, and that there's only one dreamer, and that the world exists only in the view of that one dreamer. Many of them say, "Oh, though sometimes Gaudapada and Shankara talked about the world as if it's a dream, they were just using that as an analogy. They just meant the world is like a dream in some respects, but not that it is actually a dream." That is the interpretation of many people, because their minds aren't mature enough to accept the deeper teachings. But Bhagavan made it very clear. But when it is said the world is a dream, it literally means it's just a dream. And in a dream, there's only one dreamer. All that is required is for that one dreamer to wake up, and the whole problem is solved. So if we want to solve all the problems of the world, all we need to do is to wake up. And in order to wake up, all we need to do is to investigate ourselves and thereby surrender ourselves. And that will eradicate ego. And when ego comes to an end, the world will come to an end. All problems will be solved. But all problems exist only in the view of ourself as ego. When we're asleep, we don't see any problems. Only when we rise as ego in waking and dream, do we see so many problems in the world. So in the second sentence, in the first sentence, he ended by saying, "I will say." In other words, he will give his verdict on this issue, whether liberation is with form, without form, or with or without form. His verdict is, he expresses in the second sentence, uru-v-aruvam, uru-v-aruvam, āyum ahandai-uru, āṛidal mutti, uṇar. That's actually two sentences. Uṇar is a separate word, but we can take it as part of this sentence, in effect. Uṇar means no. So if we take it as part of this sentence, know that the ego form that's ahandai-uru, which distinguishes form, formless, and form, formless. That's it, these three types of mukti. The ego form being destroyed is liberation, is mukti. That is what Bhagavan is saying, is all these differences, form, formless, or with or without form, all these differences appear in whose view? Only in the view of ourself as ego. In sleep, there are no such distinctions. There's no, we don't think about whether things are, whether mukti form is a state of form, or a formless state, or a state which can be either. It's only when ego rises in waking and dream that we get these notions about all these differences. All differences of any kind whatsoever exist only in the view of ourself as ego. That's why there are no differences of any kind whatsoever in sleep, but all differences appear in waking and dream. So this ego, which distinguishes, which sees all these differences, that ego being destroyed, that alone is liberation. So Bhagavan's final verdict is liberation is nothing but annihilation of ego, eradication of ego. That alone is our aim. That alone is the purpose of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. And it's, though this work is called Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, 40 verses on what is, relatively little Bhagavan actually says in this work about what is. Most of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu is focusing on ego. Why is that? Because if ego is removed, what remains, that is Uڵḷadu. So that state in which ego, ahandai-uru aṛidal mutti, that state of liberation in which ego is eradicated, or the form of ego is eradicated, that is the state of Uڵḷadu. Because what remains when all appearances cease, that is what is real. That is what actually exists. So the whole Bhagavan begins Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, begins verse 1 with the words Nam olahum kandalal, because we see the world. Who is it who see? Who is the we who see the world? It is ego. So the very first word of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, he begins with the word. He begins with the word nam, we, but he begins by referring to ego, because it's ego who sees the world, and he ends by saying the destruction of ego, the state of the ego being destroyed, that alone is liberation. That alone is our goal. So the whole of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu is about, and he summarizes it all in verse 26. Ahandai-undāyin anetum-undāhum. Ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahandai-indru-anetum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ahandai-uru-vam. Ego itself is everything. Aṛidal uru-v-aruvam or. Therefore, know that investigating what this ego is giving up everything. So the state of liberation is the state in which we have investigated ego and found that there's no such thing at all. That alone is the state of liberation. And in that state, there can be no differences such as form, formless, with or without form. How forms come into existence, Bhagavan explains in verse 4 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. Uruvam tānayin ulhu paramatran. If oneself is a form, the world and God will also be forms. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? So forms exist only in the view of ego. Why do forms exist in the view of ego? Because as ego, we always grasp the form of a body as I. So because we experience ourselves as a form, we experience everything else as form. But if we look at ourselves, ego itself has no form of its own. Because in this state, at present I take this person, this body called Michael, to be I. I feel I am Michael. but before the birth of this body, I was experiencing myself as some other person. And if this dream comes to an end and I start some other dream, I'll experience myself as some other person. So ego always identifies the form of a body as itself. So because we take the form of a body as ourself, we see other forms. Forms have no reality whatsoever. They seem to be real only in the view of ourself as ego. In sleep, we don't experience any forms. So all this disputation about whether liberation is a state with form or without form, or with or without form, all these differences, all these arguments about these things, it all exists only in the view of ego. Destroy the ego and all problems are solved. That is the final conclusion of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu.
So, Michael, quick question.
Yeah.
There are some newcomers, so for their benefit, and also one of our devotees, Ram, wants to clarify. Can you please define ego in one or two sentences?
Yes and no. I mean, it is possible to define it in a way, but according to Bhagavan, ego is just that false awareness. What is real is only our fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. But when we rise as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am, whether we rise as ego or not. But when we rise as ego, instead of being aware of ourselves just as I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, I am this person. So that false awareness, I am this body, that adjunct-bound self-awareness, that is ego. But ego, as Bhagavan says in verse 25, ego has no form of its own. He describes it as uru-v-aruvam ahandai, this formless phantom ego. But he says, this formless phantom ego, how does it come into existence? Uru-patri-undam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Uru-patri-nikam, grasping form, it stands. Uru-patri-undu miha-ongam, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes. Uru-vittu uru-patram, leaving one form, it grasps another form. So this form grasping phantom, that which is now aware of itself as I am this body, I am so-and-so, I am Michael, or I am whoever, that is ego. So ego is that which is, ego is the subject, that which is aware of all objects, all phenomena. So in other words, ego is the dreamer. Ego is that which in whose view this whole world appears. But this world appears only when our attention is facing away from ourselves. When we turn our attention back to ourselves, all phenomena disappear, and not only do all objects disappear, but subject disappears along with it. In other words, ego disappears. We seem to be ego only so long as we are looking away from ourselves. When we look at ourselves, there's no such thing to be found. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 17 of Upadeshundya, referring to, there he uses the term mind, but he's referring to ego also. I mean, what he means by ego in that context is mind. I mean, what he means by mind in that context is only ego. Manatin uru-v maruva manamenam ondrile undipara. If without forgetfulness, without unforgettingly, unceasingly, without allowing our attention to be distracted away. That's what he means by maruvadu. Uchaba, when one investigates the form of mind without forgetfulness, manamenam ondrile, there's no such thing as mind at all. So this ego seems to exist only when we're looking elsewhere. When we look for ego, tedinal autem pidicum, it's sought, it takes flight. There is no such thing as ego. But though there is no such thing as ego, all this appears because of our rising as ego. So it's, in other words, it's because of our looking away from ourselves that we seem to be ego and that we seem to see all these phenomena. If we turn back to look at ourselves, we will see there's no such thing as ego. All that actually exists is, in other words, uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, as he says in Upadeshundya. Uڵḷadu, what actually exists is only uruva, only awareness. Awareness in that context means pure awareness, not awareness of phenomena, but awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. That is the reality. That is our real nature. So when we write, there are two defining characteristics of ego. We can say ego is always aware of phenomena, and ego is always aware of itself as if it's one among those phenomena. So that which is aware of anything other than itself is ego. That which is aware of itself as a person is ego.
So me thinking of myself as Kumar is ego.
Exactly.
And that is wrong. And so if I'm not Kumar, then what am I? I just, as I said, for newcomers are here, so I just want to make sure.
Bhagavan says, find out. You have
find out.
If you want to see, what is the sun? If you want to see what is the sun, you have to look up you have to turn your eyes up into the sky and look at it. But the problem is, if you look at the sun, you'll be blinded. Likewise, if we want to see what is ego, if we look at it, we will be blinded and see no ego. We'll see only pure awareness. Blinded means we'll never again see any phenomena or we'll never feel we'll never rise as ego and feel ourselves to be any phenomena. So it's only by self-investigation we can find out the reality of ego.
And if you are to believe, which I do, Bhagavan's statement in one of the verses in Upadeshundya, so once the ego is gone, I find that I am the anadi ananta akhanda satchidananda.
When we know what our real nature, what then remains is anadi, beginningless, ananta, endless or infinite, limitless, akhanda, unbroken, undivided, indivisible, sat, chit, ananda. Sat means being, or what actually is. Chit is what is aware, that's a pure awareness. Ananda is infinite happiness. So anadi, ananta, akhanda, satchidananda. That is what we actually are.
Thank you, Michael. That's a nice explanation. Did I interrupt your thoughts on the verse? Please go ahead.
I think I've finished. I could just I could summarize the verse again if you like. That is what, just to read through the whole meaning of the verse. What Bhagavan says is, if it is said so as to be agreeable to the mind or to suit the maturity of the mind, but the liberation one attains is of three kinds: with form, without form, or with or without form. I will say, know that only the destruction of the ego form, which distinguishes these three kinds of liberation, with form, without form, or with or without form, is liberation or mutti. So that's Bhagavan's conclusion to Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. Since Bhagavan wrote this as a Kalivemba, Muruganar added two more lines, concluding lines, in which he said, the meaning of the last two lines is, Idu Arol Ramanan, Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadum, Ondru Kalivemba, Uڵḷadu Kartum Oli. What that means is this, in which all the 40 on what is, that's all 40 verses of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, of gracious Ramana, became one Kali. So this, meaning this text, Upadesh Kalivemba, as the Kalivemba version is called, in which all the 40 verses on what is composed by Bhagavan Ramana race became one Kalivemba. Uڵḷadu Kartum Oli is the light that reveals the Uڵḷadu. As I was saying, Bhagavan doesn't actually say a lot about Uڵḷadu in this work, but if we follow the path that Bhagavan teaches us in this work, in other words, if we investigate ourselves and see that there is no such thing as ego, if the ego comes to an end and we remain in the state of mukti, that is the state of uḷḷadu. That is what actually exists. In other words, our real nature is what actually exists. So, but that can be revealed not by words, but only by following the path that Bhagavan has shown us, this path of self-investigation. That's why Murugan says this is the light that shows uḷḷadu, or that reveals uḷḷadu. It reveals it by showing us the path to annihilate the ego and thereby be aware of ourselves as we actually are. Because what is uḷḷadu? We alone are uḷḷadu. Uḷḷadu means what is or what exists, what actually exists. As Bhagavan says in the first sentence of the 7th paragraph of Nana, Yatathamai uḷḷadu ekatmasrupam andre. What actually exists is only Atma-surupam. Atma-surupam means the real nature of oneself, our own real nature. That alone is what actually exists. That alone is uḷḷadu.
So I have a few questions. Thank you, Michael. A few questions. You had mentioned the 2 characteristics of ego. Yes. I think it was probably not clear, so one of the devotees asked to clarify.
Okay. Ego has 2 features. As ego, we are always aware of phenomena. We're always aware of things other than ourselves. Not only that, we're always aware of ourselves as if we were one among those phenomena. Now I'm aware of myself as this body. In a dream, we dream ourselves to be a participant in the dream. But the body that we experience as ourself in a dream is itself a part of the dream. So whenever we're dreaming, we're aware of a dream world, and we're aware of ourselves as if we are a part of that dream world. In other words, as if we're a body which is a part of that dream world. So the nature of ego is to be aware of phenomena, in other words, to be aware of things other than ourselves, things that appear and disappear, and to be aware of ourselves as if we are a person who is one among those phenomena. The person means, the term Bhagavan generally used is body, but he clarified in verse 5 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu what he means by body is not just this physical form, because we never experience a dead body as I. We never experience a sleeping body as I. It's always a living body and a seemingly awake body. Yeah, it seems to be I. So because it's a living body, it's not only a physical form, it's also life. Life is the pranamaya kosha. So the body is the annamaya kosha, the physical, the sheath made out of food. It's literally what that annamaya kosha means. Pranamaya kosha is the sheath made out of prana or life. And because the body, we don't experience that. Because we don't experience a dead body as I, we always experience the body as living. So we experience the pranamaya kosha. We also don't experience a sleeping body. The mind seems to be active whenever we are aware of a body as I. So the grosser functions of the mind, the perception and the thinking and the remembering, all these grosser functions, these are called manamaya kosha, the sheath composed of mind. Then the distinguishing and judging and discriminating aspect of the mind, the intellect, is called vijñānamaya kosha. But underlying all these things is the will. The will is what is called anandamaya kosha. The will is chittam. Chittam is anandamaya kosha. So manam is manamaya kosha. Buddhi is vijñānamaya kosha. Chittam is anandamaya kosha. The will means all our desires, our likes, dislikes, attachments, hopes, fears, all these, all aspects of our will, all these in their seed form are vasanas. All the vasanas collectively form the will. That is the subtlest of all the 5 sheaths. That's why it's sometimes also referred to as the karana sarira, the causal body. So whenever we experience a body as I, we're not only experiencing this physical form, we also experience the life, the mind, the intellect, and the will, all that whole bundle. That's what Bhagavan says. Uru panchakosa uru. The body is a form composed of 5 sheaths. So these 5 elements, each one of which is more subtle than the previous one. So they usually start from grossest to the subtlest. So the grossest is the physical body. Next subtlest is the pranamaya kosha, the life. Next, more subtle than that is manomaya kosha, the mind, the grosser functions of the mind. More subtle than that is intellect. And most subtle of all is the vasanas, the will, the anandamaya kosha. So all these together form the body. So we can say, in other words, a person consists of all these 5 sheaths. As ego, we are always aware of ourselves as a body or a person, a body in this sense, or a person. Sorry, I've forgotten what the question was I was answering. Did I answer it, or did I go off on a red herring?
No, I think you did. So explained the nature of ego, in detail. That's good. Let me. So there is another question which is probably related. Could you please define phenomena for us? Is it a sensory perception, or there is more to it?
Anything that appears and disappears. Well, ego, strictly speaking, is not a phenomena because it's that which is aware of all phenomena. But ego also, anything other than ego that appears and disappears is a phenomena. So all thoughts, feelings, likes, dislikes, desires, attachment, all are phenomena. Anything that doesn't exist in sleep, other than ego, is a phenomena. Ego is the subject, phenomena are the objects. So phenomena is a literally the English word phenomena comes from Greek, which means what is presented or what appears. So whatever appears is phenomena. But it all appears in whose view does it? Nothing can appear except in the view of something. So all phenomena appear in whose view? Only in the view of ourselves as ego. So it's only as ego that we are aware of phenomena. That's why we are not aware of any phenomena in sleep. In sleep we're aware, but we're not aware of any phenomena. Because we haven't risen as ego and identified ourselves as a body. But as soon as we wake up or begin dreaming, we project a body, which we take as I, and through the 5 senses of that body, we project a world. So generally phenomena we can divide into 2. We can say physical phenomena, or all these external phenomena, the tables, chairs, sun, trees, mountains, all physical things. We can say they're physical phenomena, and all the other phenomena, the thoughts, the feelings, the likes, the dislikes, all these things, these are mental phenomena. But according to Bhagavan, all physical phenomena are actually just mental phenomena, because, as he says in verse 6 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, verse 6, the world is nothing but the five types of sense perception. So what we call the world is consists of nothing but sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile sensations. This is all the world as we know it. Is only these 5 types of sensation, and these 5 types of perceptual experiences. But perceptual phenomena are all mental phenomena. It's only the mind that sees all these things. So in a dream, there seems to be a physical world existing out there. In a dream, we see trees and cars and sun and moon and all these things. They all seem to be existing out there. They all seem to exist independent of ourselves, so long as we're dreaming. But when we wake up, we realize it's all just our own mental creation. According to Bhagavan, all phenomena are mental. including all the phenomena we see now, the PC in front of us, the internet and all these things, it's all within our mind. When we're asleep, we're not aware of any of these things. It's only when we rise as ego that we project all these things. Does that adequately answer the question?
Yes, I did. So I'm gonna. Ravi has posted some messages, but I'll just let him ask himself. Ravi, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Ravi Day.
Sure, Michael. I just want to ask for some clarifications. Why is the causal body, Karana Sharira, referred to as the Anandamaya Kosha, when, if anything, it keeps us away from Ananda?
Because our real nature is happiness, and not only is our real nature happiness, it's also love for happiness. All desires are driven by one fundamental desire. What do we all ultimately want? We want to be happy. If I think I'll be happy by being rich, I want to be rich. If I think I'll be happy watching a football match, I want to watch a football match. So whatever we desire because we think we will get happiness from that thing. So Bhagavan says in the first paragraph of Nana, he says, Sakala jivagalum dukkam embadindri epodum sukamai iraka virumbadalum. Since all living beings like to be always happy without what is called misery, yavakum taniditilaye parama priyam irapadalum. Since for everyone the greatest love is only for oneself, priyataku sukame karanam adlalam. Since happiness alone is the cause for love. That's a very significant clause there. Since happiness alone is the cause of love, that is, we love or we desire whatever we think makes us happy. Because we associate happiness with certain things, we desire those things. Because we think certain things detract from our happiness or cause us suffering, we dislike those things. So all likes and dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, everything, it's all caused by those, what we think makes us happy and what we think doesn't make us happy. But according to Bhagavan, this is all, happiness doesn't actually lie in anything other than ourselves. I'll continue reading this sentence. So from these first three clauses, since all living beings want to be always happy without misery, since for everyone the greatest love is only for oneself, and since happiness alone is the cause for love, what Bhagavan implies by these three clauses is we all want to be happy, we have greatest love for ourselves, and happiness alone is the cause of love. Therefore, what we should understand from this is, what Bhagavan is saying, happiness is our real nature. Because if happiness were not our real nature, we wouldn't love ourselves. We love ourselves because we are happiness. So that's a very, very important. And then he gives a further argument why that is the case. He says, Manamatra nidrayo dinamanubhavikam tan subhavamana achukate adeya tanne tan āyridal vendam. That means, in order to attain that happiness, which is one's own nature, why is it one's own nature? For the reasons he gives in the first three clauses. In order to obtain that happiness, which is one's own nature, and then he gives another reason, which one experiences daily in sleep, which is devoid of mind. So in sleep is a state devoid of mind. So in sleep, there's nothing other than ourselves. Because all phenomena appear only in the view of mind or ego. So when mind and ego or ego is absent, what remains is only ourselves. And in that state, we're perfectly happy. That's another reason why happiness is our real nature. Indirectly, he's saying. So in order to obtain that happiness, which is one's own nature, which one experiences daily in dreamless sleep, which is devoid of mind, tanne tan āyridal vendam. oneself, knowing oneself is necessary. Adakku nana ennum ஞான-vichārame mukhya sadhanam. For that, ஞான-vichara, called who am I, alone is the principal means. This ඥāna-vichara means, jnana in this context means awareness. So ඥāna-vichara is awareness investigation. In other words, investigating our own awareness, who am I, alone is the principal means for oneself to know oneself. So, so the reason, or the sheath composed of all our vasanas is called the Anandamaya Kosha, is because all vasanas are all ultimately desire for happiness. But because of our wrong discrimination, because we think happiness lies in tasty food or having a lot of money in the bank or having a better job or having an agreeable husband or wife or having good children or whatever, people think happiness, people seek happiness in so many things. But all desires are all ultimately driven by the one fundamental desire we all have. We all mean, doesn't mean only in human birth, but even the smallest ant in toiling away doing whatever it's doing is seeking happiness. From the tiniest, the most insignificant jiva up to the highest God, all are seeking happiness. But why? Because happiness is our real nature. And so long as we rise as an ego, we are separated from our real nature. Or we're never actually separated, but we seem to be separated. Because when ego is nothing but a wrong awareness of ourselves as I am this person. So long as we're aware of ourselves as I am this person, I am this body, we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So we're not aware of ourselves as Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda, the beginningless, endless, infinite, unbroken being, awareness, and happiness. So we cannot be without. We can never. All our actions are driven only by this desire for happiness. But we are, as Bhagavan said, we are seeking happiness in the wrong place. Happiness doesn't lie outside. Happiness lies only within.
Does that answer your question, Rabi?
Yeah, it did. And that's a segue to my other question that was there, is where do dreams come from? Either in dreams or in the waking life, which is also nothing but a dream.
Yeah, it's ultimately the root cause of everything is our rising as ego. When we rise as ego, as I said, we seemingly separate ourselves from our real nature, which is infinite happiness. So as ego, we are always driven to regain what is ours, namely happiness, what is our own real nature. So as ego, we always have desire for happiness. So, but because of our wrong discrimination, we think happiness lies in this or that. So all our likes and dislikes, our desires and so on, in their seed form are called vasanas. So these vasanas are what give rise to this, to the appearance of any dream, whether what we now take to be dream or this present state, which according to Bhagavan is also a dream. So Bhagavan says, whatever we see outside is only a projection of our own vasanas.
Thank you, Michael.
The vasanas don't exist independently. Whose vasanas are they? They are my vasanas. They're the ego's vasanas. So the root cause of everything, the immediate cause is the vasanas, but the cause of the vasanas is ego. So though the vasanas are called the causal body, that is not the ultimate cause. The ultimate cause, the first cause, according to Bhagavan, the cause of all other causes is ego, is our rising as ego.
So it's a vasanas that's causing the dream. Basically.
Yeah, the dream is nothing but a projection of our own vasanas.
The next question is from Shohan, please.
Namaskaram, Michael.
Namaskaram.
Michael, so it's very apparent that the more subtler sheaths like chinta, buddhi, and vasanas, they are distracting us from our main goal, which is liberation, right? So is there any way that they can be aligned to help us rather than any way at all?
Not all vasanas are necessarily bad. Those vasanas which draw our mind outwards towards phenomena are called Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya is a Sanskrit word, but basically means, in this context, basically means phenomena. So our liking to be aware of phenomena are called Vishaya vasanas. But if we practice the path that Bhagavan has taught us, the path of self-investigation and self-surrender, our Vishaya vasanas gradually get weakened. And in their place, what is strengthened is what is sometimes called satvasana, liking just to be. It's also, another equivalent term is swatma bhakti, the love for our own self. So during the course of our spiritual practice, our self-investigation and self-surrender, we are gradually weakening our Vishaya vasanas and strengthening our sattvasana, our liking just to be. So this is how we rectify our will. This is what is sometimes called purification, chittasuddhi, purification of the will, or purification of the mind. Purification of mind. What are the impurities in the mind are nothing but the Vishaya vasanas, the vasanas that tend to draw our mind outwards towards phenomena. The vasana which draws our mind inwards, that is sattvasana. So that is what we are cultivating by trying to practice self-investigation and self-surrender. So will is not a bad thing, but we have to rectify our will. Our will, which is now drawing our mind outwards, we have to reform it and cultivate that love to go within. Bhakti is also a part of our will. So bhakti is a good thing. True bhakti, that's a love to just to subside within, a love to surrender ourselves. Does that answer your question adequately?
Oh yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. And the buddhi and the chaitana, can that help also?
Buddhi, yeah, buddhi is the judging aspect of the mind. We can use our judgment. Now, generally, why our mind goes out towards phenomena, because we think happiness lies in those phenomena. But we can use our intellect to discriminate. However much money I accumulate, I'm still dissatisfied. So what's the use of going on accumulating more money? However much I enjoy these pleasures, I'm never satisfied. So the happiness I'm seeking is not in these things. We can use our power of judgment, our power of discrimination, to slowly wean our mind, to wean our mind away from its habit of going after phenomena. So intellect certainly can be useful. But what guides the intellect is the will. Generally, people think it's by my intellect I discriminated and decided this, but actually what people believe is what they want to believe. We then use our intellect to justify what we want to believe. So if I want to believe this world is real, I will find some clever argument to say that the world is real. I will, even if I can't convince you, I'll be able to convince myself. And so yes, definitely the world is real. All these people who say world is a dream, they're just, obviously the world isn't a dream. Of course it's not a dream. We convince ourselves whatever we want to believe, we justify our own beliefs. So intellect is always a tool in the hand of the will. Ultimately in the hands of ego, but the ego acts according to its will, and it uses its intellect to justify what it wants. Even the criminal, even the burglar who goes and steals money, he'll find some justification in his mind. He'll feel, no, it's not fair. I'm poor and these people are rich, so that's not fair. So it's no wrong in me going and stealing their money. Even the murderer will find some justification. So the intellect is always ultimately driven by our likes and dislikes. But if we are on this spiritual path, when we know that, when we understand Bhagavan's teachings, we can use our intellect to help to rectify our will. So though intellect is a tool in the hand of the will, if we have a desire to give up our Vishaya vasanas and cultivate this Sat vasana, we can use our intellect to support us in this endeavor. That is manana, reflection, thinking deeply about Bhagavan's teachings and slowly convincing ourselves. But mere reflection on Bhagavan's teachings isn't going to convince us. The real conviction comes from practice. Because the more we turn our mind within, the more clarity is given to our intellect, and the more clearly we're able to see the truth of what Bhagavan taught us. So the real clarity comes, manana is important, but thinking deeply about what Bhagavan taught us is important, but it's insufficient. It's what is most important is the practice, because only from practice can we get the real deep clarity. Is that clear what I explained?
Oh yeah, that was very, very clear. Thank you so much. That was very illuminating. That was awesome. Thank you.
So the next question is from Dr. Lingam. So he asks, is it true that the causal body or the karana sarira exists in a dormant form even after the world as we know it ceases to exist?
This is another thing that I was saying, manatuku or tango, as Bhagavan said, according to the to agreeable to the mind, or to suit the maturity of the mind, different levels of explanation are given. Let's leave aside pralaya or anything like that, the destruction of the world. In sleep, generally it is said, but in sleep, the karana sarira remains. Why is it said like that? Because people want an explanation. How do we, in sleep, if there's nothing, if there's no ego in sleep, how do we wait? How do we rise as ego again after sleep? So it is, or the vasanas remain in a seed form in sleep, in a dormant form, as the karana sarira, and then it causes the rising of waking and dream. That's a simple explanation which satisfies many minds. But if we think more deeply about it, how in sleep there's no ego. We're not aware of ourselves as I am this person. We're not aware of ourselves as any person or any body. So ego doesn't exist in sleep. How can the vasanas exist in the absence of ego? Because whose vasanas are they? They're ego's vasanas. So if there's no ego in sleep, there's also no karana sarira. That's why Bhagavan said, the truth is, sleep is actually a state of pure awareness. Sleep, it's only from the perspective of the mind in waking and dream, but it seems that all our vasanas remain in sleep in a seed form. So these are different levels of teaching, appropriate to different contexts and appropriate to people of different levels of maturity. So, okay, then the question arises, okay, if there's no karana sarira even in sleep, if karana sarira, if ego ceases to exist in sleep, and therefore karana sarira, the will, the vasana, cease to exist with it, how does it all come back into existence again in waking and dream? Bhagavan's answer to that is, it's the wrong question to ask. How does ego come into existence? Because ego doesn't actually exist. When we say, how does ego come into existence? How does ego wake up in the morning? Or how did ego first come into existence? We are assuming that it has come into existence. But Bhagavan says, if we investigate it, we'll see there's no such thing at all. So we need not look for any explanation for ego. There is no explanation for ego, because according to Bhagavan, ego is the first cause. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahandai-uru and āyum, as he says in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. Ahandai-uru. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So nothing exists prior to ego. Since nothing exists prior to ego, ego, there's no cause of ego. But how can something come into existence if it has no cause? See if it is, Bhagavan will say, see if it is come into existence. You're assuming it's come into existence because you're looking elsewhere. Look back at ego. See if you can find any such thing. If you can find an ego, bring it to me, and then we can find out how it came into existence. But if we look for ego, we don't find any such thing, because ego seems to exist only when we're looking elsewhere. When we look back at ourselves, there's no such thing to be found. So we don't need to, the mind always is looking for explanations, but the one thing we cannot explain is how we rose as ego. Ego is Maya, to put it in a nutshell, and as it is said in so many texts, Maya is anivachaniya. Anivachaniya literally means it's inexpressible, but what it implies is it's inexplicable. It cannot be explained. Bhagavan gave a very novel meaning to the term Maya. As far as I'm aware, nobody else gave this explanation. Bhagavan said, Maya is Ya Ma. Ya is a feminine form of what? So, or we can say she who. Ma is a negative. So she who is not, or what is not. So Maya doesn't exist at all. Maya is just another name for ego. So why we cannot explain Maya? Because you can't explain something that doesn't exist. Can you explain to me how the barren woman gave birth to her son? Nobody can explain that, because if she's a barren woman, she didn't give birth to a son. If she gave birth to a son, she's not a barren woman. So there's no such thing as the son of a barren woman. So nobody can explain how the son of a barren woman is born. Likewise, Maya is the son of a barren woman. It doesn't exist. Maya means ego. Ego doesn't actually exist. We cannot explain it. Looking for explanations, we're looking away from ourselves. Bhagavan said, don't try to explain ego. See whether it exists. Look at yourself and see, are you ego or not? So since, according to though it is said in so many Advaitic texts, but in sleep, karana sarira remains, and though Bhagavan sometimes talked accordingly, his actual teaching is there's no karana sarira without ego. Nothing exists without ego. Since ego doesn't exist in sleep, there is no karana sarira. That is Bhagavan's final verdict. Since karana sarira doesn't exist in sleep, it also doesn't exist in pralaya. Even pralaya is just an idea. There's so many different, because of people are at so many different levels of spiritual maturity, because people have so many different likes and dislikes, spiritual teachings are given accordingly. So generally in Hinduism, it's said, wherever the world is created by Brahma, sustained by Vishnu, and destroyed by Shiva, and it's going through constant cycles. There are 4 yugas, and it all comes to an end in pralaya, and then it starts again, and goes through the cycle of the 4 yugas, and then it again comes to an end. All this is said to suit different levels of maturity. The people have different levels of maturity. But according to Bhagavan, what has created this world is nothing but ourself, our rising as ego. That is the cause for the appearance of the world. That standing as ego is the sustenance. So we are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So if we rise as ego, we are Brahma. If we continue looking at the world, we are Vishnu. If we turn back and look at ourselves, we are Shiva. So all this pralaya is when the ego comes to an end. That is the true pralaya. That is the mahapralaya. Until then, dreams go on. All this description of cycles of creation are actually just the cycle of birth and death. In other words, one dream following on from another dream. So long as the dreamer exists, dreams will be coming one after another. Put an end to the dreamer. Dreamer is ego. How do we put an end to it? Investigate it. See whether it actually exists. Who am I? That problem is solved.
Right. Thank you, Michael. That was nice.
Questions?
That's a good question here. So I'll just give a context. In chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita, Arjun asks Sri Krishna, there are devotees who worship you in form, and there are those who worship the unmanifest. Which of these is better? In his answer, Sri Krishna, in verse 5, he says, the task of those whose minds are set on the unmanifest is more difficult. He seems to argue that some people can start with the form and worship. So with that sort of context, now Dr. Chilukuri here is asking a question. Is it easier to understand the teachings of Bhagavan if Brahman is perceived to be formless and work to understand the reality backwards? So he's arguing the other way around. So do you think it's easier?
Okay. It all depends on our maturity of mind. For those people who are much attached to forms, they will find it easier to worship God in form. They will be inclined to believe God is a form, something separate from himself. So that's appropriate at their level of spiritual development. But when we go deeper and deeper on the spiritual path, the idea, supposing the idea of many devotees is that it's wrong to say I am God. God is separate. I am separate. If God is separate from ourselves, or if we are separate from God, let's say, if we are separate from God, we are thereby limiting God. That means God is no longer infinite. A God who is other than ourselves is a finite God. But if God is infinite, nothing can be other than him. Because if there's anything is other, then the infinite is limited, is no longer infinite. So as we go deeper in the spiritual path, the idea that God is something other than ourselves, or that we are something other than God, loses its appeal. As our bhakti matures, all we want to do is to give ourselves entirely to God, to surrender entirely to God. We don't want to stay as a separate entity. So when we reach that stage, then formless will appeal to us more. If form appeals to us more, it will seem easier. If formless appeals to us more, it will seem easier. For those of us who have been, by his grace, have been drawn to Bhagavan's path, this is a formless path, because we're turning our attention within, away from all forms, to try and know ourselves. But which is easier, to know ourselves or to know other things? Obviously, we are always aware of ourselves. We're always aware I am. Other things our attention has to move away from ourselves towards that other thing. So knowing ourselves must be easier than knowing other things. So for those who are drawn to Bhagavan's path, we will naturally find this worship of form will not be so appealing, and will therefore not appear so easy. Why to create an idea that God is something, some form, something other than ourselves? God is ever shining in our heart as eye. He's ever our nearest and dearest. He's never away from us. He's never separate from us. He loves us as his own self. For us, this is much more appealing. So what Krishna said there to Arjuna is what was suitable for Arjuna's then state of mind. As Bhagavan said, it's agreeable to the mind. So
right.
Gita is a wonderful text. There are so many different levels of teachings are given by Krishna in Gita. And also so many room for it to be interpreted in so many different ways. But Bhagavan has given us much simpler, because Bhagavan is bringing us to the very heart. What is the ultimate import of Gita is given by Bhagavan in very, very simple terms in his teachings. So we don't need all these. It's interesting to read Gita to see all these different teachings that are there, how they're all carefully woven together, and how Krishna starts from the highest, and slowly, slowly he comes down, seeing Arjuna not ready to accept things. So Bhagavan was like that. Bhagavan, if people came and questioned Bhagavan, he would first try to tell them to the path of self-investigation. Who wants to know this? He would try to tell them back to himself. When he sees that they're not ready to accept his deeper teachings, then he comes down to more to lower type of. The deepest teaching is the highest. So he comes down to lower levels of teaching to suit their then level of spiritual development.
So it's kind of like the father who has two sons, one 20 years old, another one who is 1 year old, both asking the same question. The answer is going to be different.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly.
It's depending on what they can perceive.
Yes.
So that was a really nice explanation. Thank you, Michael. So now let me. There was a hand raised by Deepthi. Go ahead.
Hi, Michael. So, no, this was brilliant when you mentioned the three forms, the Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. I never understood those aspects in that way. But so it seems to me that the ego does have a cause, and the cause seems to be Shiva. Like without Shiva, you can't have manifestation, right? So because the ego, I mean, it seems like it's like the innate tendency, it's the creative principle of Shiva, like the Shakti part. Ego is a Shakti, right? So Shiva can't seem to be without Shakti and vice versa.
Shiva can't be without Shakti because Shiva is Shakti and Shakti is Shiva. They're one and inseparable. It's only for the mind they seem to be two. So no, there is no cause for ego. Because ego doesn't exist. Something that doesn't exist. Just like there's no cause for the son of a barren woman, there's no cause for ego. Ego is what causes all other things. Even our beliefs about these three murtis, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, that's all only in the view of ego. So the ultimate cause of all phenomena, all manifestation, or whatever we call it, is only our rising as ego. Ego doesn't have, ego has, in philosophy, they distinguish different types of causes. There's the, for example, take a table. What's the cause of a table? There's the substantial cause of the wood. There's the active cause, the nimitta karana, that is the carpenter. And there's instrumental causes or secondary causes, like the carpenter needs a hammer, saw, and screwdriver and all these things. So they're instrumental causes. But the two main causes are the substantial cause and the active cause, the nimitta karana. Ego is the nimitta karana. Brahman, or our real nature, is Atma-swarupa, the substantial cause. That is, just like the table is made of wood, all phenomena are made nothing, the substance is awareness, is pure awareness. So in that sense, Brahman is the cause, but not in the sense that Brahman is actually is an active cause. Brahman is the wood, not the carpenter. The carpenter is ego. But if we look for the carpenter, he runs away. So we don't have to worry about him. And what remains when the carpenter runs away is just the wood. Brahman alone remains. Brahman means Atma-swarupa, our own real nature. So we can't blame the appearance of the world on our real nature. It's only the cause, the guilty party is only our rising as ego. So we are Brahma. That's why Brahma isn't worshipped anywhere.
Okay.
So when you said when we are rising as ego, we're not rising as ego from awareness. We're rising as ego separately.
Well, no, we're rising only from awareness, from pure awareness, because from where else can we rise? Because that alone is the substance. So, but when we say we rise as ego, what rises as ego? Only ego rises as ego. Our real nature doesn't rise as ego. So we can say we as ego rise. We as Brahman never rise, we just are. The nature of Brahman or Atma-vichara is just being. The nature of ego is rising.
Okay. And ego is a mixture of being plus rising.
You have to exist in order to rise.
Yes.
So being is the basis.
Got it.
And being, sat is chit, uḷḷadu is uru. So the being and awareness are one and the same thing. The nature of pure awareness is just being. The nature of ego is rising. And by rising, it knows other things. But knowing other things is not the nature of pure awareness. It's only the nature of that false awareness called ego.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much, Michael.
So now I have a question from Ram.
Hello, Michael. Got a couple of questions here. Not going after the material things in pursuit of happiness, that does happen one day, right? If you keep doing it, if you keep at it.
That is, the more we follow the path that Bhagavan has shown us, the more we try to turn our attention within, the more we try to surrender ourselves, the more our desires and attachments for things other, for phenomena, for things other than ourselves, it reduces in strength. They dry up and wither away, to put it metaphorically. So the more we withdraw ourselves from our desire, the more we weaken our desires, the less we will be inclined to go after things. So the easier it will be to turn our mind within. But ultimately, we cannot get rid of all desires so long as we remain as ego. Desire is the very nature of ego. Bhagavan says, uru-patri undam, uru-patri nekam. Grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping means that is at the attachment, the desire. So desire is the very nature of ego. So as ego, we cannot be totally desireless. We can reduce the strength of our outward going desires, but we can get rid of all desires only by eradicating ego. So it's the root. If you can cut all the leaves and branches, so long as the root remains, more leaves and branches will continue sprouting. So sooner or later, we've got to cut up the root. The root is ego. So it's necessary to reduce the strength of our vasanas, our outward vasanas, our outward going desires, because we won't be able to turn within until we've reduced their strength. But we cannot get rid of them entirely without getting rid of the root. That's like if you've got a very big bush and you want to root it out, you first have to cut off some of the leaves and branches before you can get at the root. Once you've cut off sufficient leaves and branches, cut the root, and the story is over. So we need to purify our mind to a certain extent in order to turn it back within.
And is ego anything other than the mind? If mind is eliminated, ego gets eliminated?
Ego is the root of the mind, the essence of the mind. Often Bhagavan uses the term mind as a synonym for ego. In verse 18 of Upadesha, he says, eṉṉil manam, thoughts alone are the mind. Of all thoughts, the first thought, the root thought, is a thought called I. Thought called I means ego. Therefore, mind is I, he says. What is called mind is I. That what he means by that is, sometimes the term mind is used as a collective term for all thoughts. All mental phenomena collectively are mind. But of all mental phenomena, the root of all mental phenomena is ego. All mental phenomena are objects. Ego is the subject. So it's that subject, the perceiving aspect of the mind is the essence of the mind, what the mind essentially is. So what the mind essentially is just ego. So in many contexts, when Bhagavan uses the term mind, he's using it in the sense of ego. But so long as ego exists, there is mind. And so long as mind exists, there is ego, because the root of mind is ego. So it's a root we need to cut, we need to get rid of. That's our aim. Our primary concern is with ego. We need not be concerned about other thoughts. Our only concern about other thoughts is we shouldn't pay attention to them. We should ignore them. But what we need to attend to is only ourselves, this ego. And when we attend to ourselves keenly enough, we'll see that we are just pure awareness, and then there's no ego at all.
Thank you, Michael.
The ego only when we're looking away from ourselves, not when we're looking back at ourselves.
Right.
Thank you.
Last question from Rabi or Rabi Day.
Like always.
Go ahead.
So my last question is, it's a Nididhyasana question. We have heard that Bhagavan once told Tinnamalai, I think, Swami, that Eru, be. And how is this same as know yourself or who am I? So how is this way of sadhana?
How do we rise as ego? We rise as ego by grasping form, one says. In other words, by attending to things other than ourselves. So long as we are facing away from ourselves, we are feeding ego and rising. When we turn our attention back to ourselves, ego subsides. Where does it subside? It subsides into, when it subsides, it stays in a state of being. So that's why Bhagavan often used to say, sadhana is not doing, sadhana is being. Real spiritual practice is not doing anything, but just being. How to be? Attend to yourself. So long as you attend to anything else other than yourself, that is a doing. When you attend to yourself, this doing ego, rising ego subsides. And when it subsides, what remains is the state of being. So because Tene Swami was a very mature soul, he understood. Bhagavan didn't even say it in a spiritual context. Tene Swami had been staying for some months with Bhagavan after resigning his job in, he was a biochemist in Madras Medical College. After resigning his job there, he came and he spent some months with Bhagavan. Then there was a job opportunity for him in Pondicherry. So when he went to take leave of Bhagavan, usually people would go to take leave of Bhagavan, Bhagavan would say, well, just nod and give his consent. But when Tene Swami went to take leave of Bhagavan that day, Bhagavan said, Iru. In the context, superficially, people think, oh, Bhagavan telling him to stay, that's unusual. Most people have thought like that. But Muruganar, who was there, observed it and he understood, but it had a deeper spiritual meaning, and he understood that Tene Swami understood the deeper spiritual meaning. That one word completely transformed Tene Swami. He didn't leave, he stayed. And not only he stayed there in Tiruvannamalai, he stayed in the state of, in his own natural state, in his own real state. That is the state of Summa Irupadu, just being. And then though he was actually a family man, he was married, he had 4 sons, he started begging his food and just completely, well, he became a sadhu, but I mean, not just an ordinary sadhu. He was completely absorbed all the time in himself. And even when his family came and pleaded with him to come back home, he remained unmoved because he knew Bhagavan would take care of them.
Thank you, Michael. So nice to hear the story again and again.
Yes.
Things.
Yes.
Thank you, Michael. So just wanted to conclude the session. I'm just looking at the 40th verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. And I'll just read the Tamil, so I'll let Michael translate it and make a comment. The Tamil verse goes like this: Ahila Vedanta Siddhanta Sarathai Ahamunmayaga Araivan Ahanchittu Ahamaduvahi Arivu Uruvamau ahandai-ichamari.
Okay, that means Akila Vedanta Siddhanta Sarate Aham Unmayaha Urevan. I will truly tell the essence of all the Vedantas. Siddhanta in this means the final conclusion of all of Vedanta. Aham Setu. Aham Setu means I dying. I in that context means ego. Aham Setu. Aham adu ahil. If oneself becomes that. Okay, so the whole of that clause means if ego dying, I becomes that. Uru-v-aruvam aham ahandai-ichamari. Know that I, which is the nature of which is the form of awareness, or the nature of awareness, alone will remain. So when the essence of all Vedanta is that if ego dies and thereby we become that, I, which is the nature of awareness, alone will remain. So when ego dies, what remains is only our real nature, which is pure awareness. In essence, is what it means.
So that's a beautiful statement. That is the very essence of all Vedanta. He says Ahila Vedanta Siddhanta. I'm sorry, Ahila Vedanta Sara, right?
No, Akila Vedanta Siddhanta Sara.
Siddhanta Sara, right? Siddhanta Sara.
Siddhanta, as I say, means the final conclusion in this context.
Final conclusion, right?
Final conclusion of all of Vedanta. It's, again, the death of ego. That's all Bhagavan is concerned
exactly.
about.
Right.
All problems are caused only by ego. So Bhagavan is not concerned about any other problems. Bhagavan is tackle ego and problems are solved. Otherwise, any other problem, if we try and solve, you solve one problem and another problem crops up. Because so long as the root remains, the leaves and branches will continue sprouting. We have to cut up the root. That is Bhagavan's sole concern. That's why Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, most of the verses of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu are dealing with ego.
Right.
Remove ego, what remains is Uḷḷadu.
Right.
That is how Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu reveals the truth. It reveals to us how to get rid of this ego. How to get rid of it, why to get rid of it, and how getting rid of it will solve all problems, because everything is caused only by our rising as ego. All troubles are caused only by our rising as ego.